Ladies and gentlemen, hello and welcome to my third video in the Revolution Software Retrospective. If you haven't seen my two previous videos in this series, I suggest you go watch them first before watching this one. Disclaimer: for reasons that are beyond me, I almost always mess up the title of this game when typing it. So instead of fixing my typos, I will pronounce this game's title the exact way I typed it every single time. Enjoy. Lure of the Temptress was a successful debut game that put Revolution on the minds of adventure gamers everywhere. And Beneath a Steel Sky was a huge hit that guaranteed their place right next to the big boys, LucasArts and Sierra Online. So there was nowhere else to go but up. And that's exactly what Revolution Software wanted to do with their next game. They wanted something with bigger production value, a greater story, a grander experience. Something that would change the world of point-and-click adventures forever. Broken Sword: The Shadow of the Templars, developed by Revolution Software and published by Version Interactive Entertainment on PC, Sony Computer Entertainment and THQ on the PlayStation, and BAM! Entertainment on the Game Boy Advance. The game was a massive success. The critics loved it, the fans adored it, it won many awards, and it sold over 800,000 copies within the first 4 years after its release, outselling most of its competitors, including The Curse of Monkey Island. Ask any adventure gamer what their top 10 point-and-click adventures are, and Broken Sword will almost always be on their list, and probably in the top half of it. I played it when it came out, and it was my all-time favorite adventure game for a long time. Many people consider it a masterpiece, and even those who have never played an adventure game have at least heard of it. It also served as an inspiration for many game designers in their own games. So yeah, as I said, many people consider it a masterpiece. Many people. A lot of people. So many people. And I'm not one of them. Now, before you close the video and wish for my death in the most painful ways, hear me out. See, as a kid, I never really had a PC, so I only got to play adventure games on my cousin's PC whenever I get to visit them. And the only adventure games they had were Sierra games. Other than those, I could only play the ones that were released on consoles. So when Broken Sword came out, I was blown away by it. After years of being subjected to the torture that is Sierra games, my mind couldn't fathom that adventure games could be so great. The voice acting, the story, the visuals, it was brilliant. However, since then, I have played every single point-and-click adventure I could get my hands on, including Beneath a Steel Sky, Revolution's previous game. And honestly, after playing that, I have to say I think Broken Sword was kind of a step down, at least as far as gameplay goes. Don't get me wrong, I still think it's a fantastic game, and I still consider it one of the best adventure games ever made. But after finding out that Revolution Software were capable of doing something better, I just feel like maybe this isn't the masterpiece people make it out to be. It's almost there though. It's so close to being the best adventure game ever made, but I think it has some flaws that keep it from being the masterpiece it deserved to be. And in this review, we'll take a look at what's holding it back from being the best it could be. But first, I'm gonna talk about what I loved about this game. So if you wanna skip that and go straight to the part where I talk about the gameplay, you can check the video's description for the appropriate timestamp. Before we move on with this video, here's your spoiler warning. I will try my best to blur out any major story spoilers, however, there will inevitably be a lot of major puzzle spoilers and some minor story spoilers. If you haven't played this game yet, I suggest you do so before watching this video. It's a fantastic game, regardless of any flaws it has. If you'd like to hear more about it before playing it, then that's fine. I'll do my best to keep story spoilers to a minimum, as I feel the game's plot is its strong point. Also, I'm gonna be playing the PC version because I think it's the best way to play this game. The PS1 port was great and was almost identical to the PC version. However, playing a point-and-click adventure using a D-pad just feels wrong to me. The game was also released on the Game Boy Advance. I don't think we'll be playing this one. To be precise, I'm playing the original version on ScumVM, not the director's cut. I will talk about that version at the end of the video, but the actual review will only be of the original release. If you want to play the game before watching the video, skip to this part. You'll thank me later. Now without further ado, grab a drink, sit back, and enjoy the video. Charles Cecil wanted the game to be a departure from the humorous norm the genre was well known for. He wanted it to have a serious and complex story. After reading The Holy Blood and the Holy Grail, he felt that the Knights Templar were a great subject for a video game. I want you to understand how huge this was. See, before Broken Sword, the Templars weren't common in pop culture. We're talking about a time before Assassin's Creed, the Da Vinci Code, and the Secret World. Templars were rarely mentioned in video games and movies. Unless you count Armando de Osario's Blind Death series, which has zombie Templars that used to be a group of evil knights that drink the blood of the innocent. Frankly, I highly doubt that these movies are based on actual historical events. The Templars have become quite popular in video games, novels, and movies, and I truly believe that in some way, Broken Sword helped pave the road for them. And the game doesn't only feature the Templars, it also teaches you about their history and their conflict with the Hashashin.
How did the assassins get their name?
From the legend surrounding the secrets of their initiation rites. A young man who sought to join the sect was given hashish until he drifted into dreams.
Naturally, they took some liberties, but for the most part, the history lessons in this game are quite solid and very entertaining, especially to a history nerd like myself. In fact, I would say that Broken Sword was responsible for my interest in history. Cecil, along with Dave Cummins and Jonathan Howard, started writing the game story even before the release of Beneath a Steel Sky. Both Cecil and Cummins attended a film writing course and got senior BBC scriptwriter and dramatist Alan Drury to read their script. Needless to say, a lot of love and care went into this game's story, and it shows. Broken Sword: The Shadow of the Templars not only has a great story, but it is arguably one of the best stories in video game history. Definitely one of my favorites. You play as George Sobart, an American tourist on holiday touring Europe. While sitting outside a cafe in Paris, a clown enters the cafe, snatches a man's briefcase, drops his accordion, then runs away just before his accordion blew the whole cafe up. You know, typical clown shenanigans. Moments after being questioned by the police, he meets Nicole Collat, a freelance photojournalist who seems to know something about this clown assassin. She promises to tell George everything she knows if he digs up some info that could help her with her story. What starts off with the search for a killer clown ends up being an awesome adventure where you travel around the world, explore historical locations, fight thugs, uncover secret organizations, and save the world. I cannot explain how much I adore this game's story. It has action, mystery, comedy, adventure, history, archaeology. It ticks off almost every box for me. As a kid, I was a huge fan of the Tintin comics. And since we never got a Tintin adventure game, and the games that we got were hot garbage, this game was a dream come true for me. There's even a level set in Syria, and you can imagine, as a Syrian, how exciting this is for me. I mean, sure, I could be nitpicky and point out the inaccuracies, but I won't, because I'm in this game.
My name is Nijo. Welcome to my grand emporium of quality merchandise.
It's not surprising that Broken Sword reminded me of the Tintin comics, since Cecil himself mentioned that he too was a fan, and it shows. But what good is a great story if the writing was poor? Luckily, that wasn't the case here. The jokes are funny.
Oh, don't shoot. I'm innocent. I'm an American.
Can't make up your mind, huh?
The informational parts are entertaining.
The order became known first as the Knights of the Temple and later the Knights Templar.
And the dramatic moments are effective.
I was telling the truth about Fitzy, mister.
Okay, calm down. Now tell me what happened.
Even the characters are well written.
What's that, Mr. Shiny? You'd take good care of the rascals, I'll bet you would.
Well, most of the characters anyway. In an interview with Rolf Saxon, the voice actor behind George Stobart, he talked about the time he received the game's script, which was 100 pages long, and he commented on how bulky the script was. He was quite surprised when Cecil told him that that was just the first third of the first half of the game's script. Even the recording studio voiced their surprise over how huge the script was, which ended up being over 600 pages long. That was quite long for an adventure game back in the day, so it's a good thing that the script was very well written.
As I picked myself up, all I could hear was the ceaseless drone of traffic. Life went on around me. But the explosion was to change my life forever.
Most of the jokes in the game got a laugh out of me.
Hey there, young fella. Speak you the English? Speak you the Anglese? Parlez-vous anglais?
Yes, si, and indeed oui. And rather better than you by the sound of it.
But I especially love this one. During George's visit to Spain, he meets Condesa de Vasconcelos, whose family was supposedly linked with the Templars at some point. He asks her if there's anything in her house that dates back to early medieval times, and she points out the chess set. George asks her if he could look at it, and she allows him to, but asks him not to move any of the pieces. You'd think the reason would be that perhaps she doesn't trust him in handling something so delicate, or perhaps the pieces are extremely fragile. However, later on, George convinces her that the chess pieces might be the key to uncovering an old Templar secret in her family's mausoleum. So she calls for her caretaker, Lopez, and this is what happens.
Go to the house and get my chess set. Yes, the old chess set. Oh, damn the game. Now hurry.
The first time I heard this part, I lost it. I don't know why this joke makes me laugh so hard, but it does. She never tells George why he shouldn't touch the pieces, so you'd never think a match between Lopez and herself is the reason. Overall, the game's writing is really good, although I think the script was a bit overwritten. To me, the game was like 200 pages too long, because Borokin Sword is quite full of fluff. Entertaining fluff, sure, but it's fluff nonetheless. Part of the reason is that there are many unnecessary characters in the game, such as this guard at the museum and this janitor at the hospital. They contribute nothing to the story, yet you can still have a full conversation with them. The best example of fluff is this patient at the hospital. He reminded me of Dr. Burke's patient in Beneath a Steel Sky. However, the difference between the two was that that conversation was optional. The one in this game, on the other hand, is forced on you. As soon as you enter the ward with the doctor's coat, the nurse beckons you, tells you to go check on that patient, and George automatically goes to talk to him. Sure, you could say bye as soon as you get the chance, but that's still quite a few lines of forced dialogue. And if I'm being completely honest, the conversation with this patient is nowhere near as funny as the one in Beneath a Steel Sky.
I know exactly what you mean. It's known in the medical field as blinking.
Is it serious?
Of course it isn't serious. It's perfectly natural.
But just think, 2 seconds every minute. Why, that's almost half an hour every day.
Have you brought me any grapes?
I'm afraid not.
Oh, thank goodness for that. Grapes make me feel quite squeamish. They remind me of eyeballs.
Even important characters that progress the game have a fair share of fluff that goes nowhere. Why would I talk about elements of the Templar manuscript with this American tourist I just met? You can tell every character you meet about every single inventory item that you have, and while sometimes doing so progresses the game, most of the time it's just useless. Amusing, sure, and sometimes quite funny.
Does Clown know you have his nose?
Unfortunately, it seems so.
Why unfortunate?
This clown kills people.
Ah, alternative comedy.
But still ultimately useless. Still, this was more of a nitpick than a flaw. I may feel that all this fluff is unnecessary, but there's no denying that most of it is very well written, so it's easy to enjoy these lines for enjoyment's sake, even if it had nothing to do with the main plot. Before moving on, I want to voice a small pet peeve of mine regarding the game's title. Don't get me wrong, I think the title is excellent. Broken Sword, The Shadow of the Templars is a brilliant and eye-catching name. It makes you want to know more about the game. What is this sword? Why was it broken? What's so important about it? That title alone made me want to play the game. The only problem is that I feel it kinda backfired when Revolution started releasing sequels that had no non-functional bladed weapons. Granted, I can't blame them for using that title. I get the feeling that calling it George Stobart and the Shadow of the Templars would have just been silly. By the way, seeing how the first time I ever played this game was on the PS1, I did not know that it was released under any other title. Both Sony Computer Entertainment and THQ, now THQ Nordic, released it on the PS1 under its original title, the one that was given for the European PC release. Wanna know what title Virgin Interactive gave the US PC release? Circle of Blood. I mean, why? Not only does that title make no sense as far as the game's plot goes, but it's such an uninteresting title. What was the thought process behind it? I have two theories. First, Virgin Interactive's marketing department thinks so little of American gamers that they think a game would only sell if it had an edgy title with the word blood in it. Second, whomever was responsible for this decision at Virgin Interactive was a huge fan of Armando de Osario's Blind Dead series. Regardless of what the reason was, Cecil was uneasy about the title change, and I can see why. It just sucks. Even the box art sucks. What does this tell us? All we see is a stained glass with a goofy-looking gargoyle. This says nothing about the story other than it probably has something to do with medieval Europe. Not that the European box art is any better. But at least this one seems mysterious and tells us that there's probably some sort of secret order waiting to be uncovered. But the whole box art is so messy and ugly. Plus, who the heck is this guy? He's not in the game, and I genuinely don't know who that is. And what is that tattoo on his forehead? There's nothing in the game that looks anything like this. The US box art of the GBA port is also pretty bad, but at least that one has a sword. As for the US box art on the PS1 port, now that's how you make a box art. It's similar to the PC version where all it tells you is that it has to do with medieval Europe, but the difference is that instead of a random gargoyle being the center of the box art, it's an ancient manuscript that is actually in the game. Not only is it beautifully drawn, but it's more intriguing and interesting. There's more going on here that makes you go, wow, I can't wait to see what this is about. I also think this box art complements the game's beautiful visuals quite well. I might be biased, but I believe that Broken Sword was at the time the most beautiful point-and-click adventure ever made. Even to this day, it looks absolutely gorgeous. The backgrounds were all hand-drawn and they were beautiful. Every new location you visit was a chance to marvel at all the details they put into it. I especially love this part. I have no idea why I think this screen is so beautiful, but it just makes me want to frame it and hang it in my room. The sprites were surprisingly detailed, considering how low the game's resolution is. When a character smiles or frowns, you can still clearly see it. And the animation is absolutely fantastic. Look at Rosso's theatrical turning animation. Look at this part where a shopkeeper pranks George by shocking him. Look how the wind manipulates George's hair and clothes whilst he's on top of this train. They even change direction when you turn around. The backgrounds, the animation, the colors, everything about this game is a joy to look at. Unsurprising, seeing how much focus they put into making sure that the game is as beautiful as it turned out to be. Steve Ince, who became the game's producer halfway through development, began drawing location sketches for Broken Sword before moving on to work on Beneath a Steel Sky's backgrounds. The team was very excited to work on this game. Unfortunately, at the time, Revolution consisted mostly of writers and programmers. When it came to the art department, the team had a slim chance of competing with giants of the industry. Luckily, Cecil was able to convince Owen Cahill of Dublin's Don Bluth Studios to join the project, so he and his colleague Neil Breen both drew the game's backgrounds in pencil, which were then colored in digitally using Photoshop. The animated cutscenes and character designs were done by the late Mike Burgess of Red Rover Animation Studio, who did an excellent job at giving the game the feel of an animated feature. Just look at this intro. The animation, the color, the direction, it was so beautiful. Not only that, but it gives you all the setup you need to start your adventure without even using a single word. It's brilliant. It really saddens me that Mike is no longer with us. He will forever be remembered for his work on this game. I also really love this cutscene.
The Templars proved invaluable to the king as a mercenary army. It was said that they never asked how many the enemy numbered, just where they were. And as the years went by, the Templars grew in wealth and numbers.
It was minimalistic, but it had such a beautiful atmosphere to it. Of course, that's mostly due to the music. Speaking of which, my god, the music in this game is absolutely fantastic. Cecil used to play cricket with the late Barrington Phelan, famous composer well known for his work on Inspector Morse and Inspector Lewis. One day, he asked Phelan if he'd be interested in composing the music for Broken Sword, and Phelan said he'd love to. In an interview with Next Generation magazine, Phelan said, "Virgin would probably have been happy with a main theme and a few cues, but I thought that rather than creating an orchestral score like for a movie, I could make one which interacted with the game. So I've written over 3 hours of music, which is unique in the genre, and over 400 cues." This was quite revolutionary at the time. The idea of having different music cues that play when the same action is taken multiple times was unheard of back then. If I were to nitpick though, the downside of having the soundtrack like that means you won't be able to relate a specific track to a specific location or a character. This is such a personal thing and it is by no means a bad thing, but let me try and explain what I feel. When I see this screen, I immediately hear when I see this character, I immediately hear However, when I see this screen, I just hear In fact, there are many quiet moments in Broken Sword, and whilst most of them make sense, some feel weird without music. Yup, I feel like I'm in a church. I guess I'm in a church? I guess I'm the type of person who prefers an ongoing soundtrack that adds to the mood of the game. I don't really like scenes in point-and-click adventures that are quiet. However, as I mentioned before, this is more of a nitpick than a flaw. The music is brilliant and is definitely one of the best aspects of this game. Plus, Broken Sword was one of the first few games back then that used live instruments and orchestral music. This game's music had a huge role in shaping my childhood and my love and appreciation for video game soundtracks. Fei Long not only composed Broken Sword 1 in the Broken Sword series, but also composed Broken Sword 2 and 5. His music is such an important part of Broken Sword that him not composing 3 and 4 is one of the main reasons why those two feel so out of place in the series. So it breaks my heart that Fei Long passed away recently. The world has lost a brilliant composer, and I don't know how the series will fare without him. Rest in peace, Barrington Fei Long. You will definitely be missed. I praised the voice acting in Beneath a Steel Sky, and I'm very happy to see a significant improvement in Broken Sword.
And what brings you to Paris, Monsieur Stobart?
Travel. I'm touring Europe.
You chose well. The city is most beautiful at this time of year, no?
The game has only a handful of voice actors, but they all did an excellent job.
Just my luck. Grasped up by a delinquent and a dimwit.
I need to talk to Professor Pegram, if he's still alive.
What do you mean? Is he in danger?
Even though each actor or actress voice multiple characters, they still try their best to make these characters unique, and it works for the most part. For example, it's obvious that this actor who plays Inspector Rosso is the same actor who plays Lopez.
Monsieur? On the surface, no. But what lurks inside the subconscious? If the door can only be opened... A more cunning man might have claimed that she had.
Oh yeah? They might have, might they?
And that more cunning man would have been kicked off the premises.
Even though the tone is the same, the delivery definitely feels different, and you'd never be able to mistake one for the other. I also think he's the same actor behind Ultar! What are you doing here, my barbarian friend?
I am Ultar, taxi driver and luxury guide per excellence, yes!
Well, it's nice to see your change in career is working out for you. Joking aside, I really loved this cameo, though I experienced it the other way around, since I played Broken Sword before playing Lure of the Temptress. And he's not the only returning character. Even Lady Piermont from Beneath a Steel Sky makes an appearance.
I am Lady Piermont. The common reaction is to kneel and stutter, but it's not obligatory.
By the way, whilst making this video, I found out that the voice actress of Lady Piermont also did the voice of Nico in Broken Sword 1, and I don't know how to feel about that.
Hi, Nico?
Hello, George! What can I do for you now?
Nico in Broken Sword 1 was voiced by the talented Hazel Ellerby, who not only did a great job as a voice actress...
I don't blame you for being scared. I am too. But this story could be my only chance of a big break.
Oh, no reason. I just wanted to hear your voice.
You did? Well, this is my voice saying, don't bother me, I'm busy.
But was also responsible for Rolf Saxon being hired as George Stobart. During production, Cecil wanted an American voice actor to play George. So Ellerby suggested Saxon, who was a classmate of hers at the Guildhall School of Music and Drama. When contacted by Cecil, Saxon happily agreed to play the role. The rest is history. You can't see George without hearing his iconic voice in your head.
She was the one who said mirror, mirror on the wall, wasn't she? She made me cry so much when I was a kid. Mom carried me out of the movie theater.
She didn't frighten me in the least.
Like I said, I was only a kid. I didn't like the crocodile in Peter Pan either.
And what a voice that is. Not only does he have a very pleasing voice, but he's also a great voice actor.
Personally, I think clowns should be banned, along with mimes.
George as a character is likable, funny, a goofball, and a bit of a romantic. And Saxon delivers the role perfectly.
Top of the morning to you!
Now if only Cecil would settle on a Nico already.
Hey, what's this inside it?
The contents of someone's nose?
Don't be cross, George. It says La Risée du Monde. Masks and costumes. It's a costume shop near the Gare Saint-Lazare.
I'll check it out. Maybe the owner...
So far, the game is almost perfect. The story is fantastic, the writing is very well done, the visuals are gorgeous, the music is beautiful, and the voice acting is brilliant. So how about the gameplay? Well, it's not that great. I have many issues with the gameplay, and I feel like this is the only aspect of the game that keeps it from being the masterpiece it was supposed to be. But before we move on with what I disliked about the gameplay, let's talk about the improvements over Beneath a Steel Sky. For example, I mentioned how Beneath a Steel Sky popularized the best point-and-click interface I've ever seen in an adventure game, and I felt like there was no way to improve on that, and thankfully I was proven wrong. Borkin Sword added action-specific icons that appear whenever you hover over a hotspot, and most of them are fully animated. You've got a hand picking up something whenever you hover over a pickable item, gears turning whenever you hover over an operable hotspot, a hand pointing towards an exit you can go through, a hand beckoning you to the other side of the room, a mouth when you can speak to someone, and a magnifying glass for non-interactable hotspots that are still of interest. The conversation system also got an overhaul for the better, where instead of the game showing you the lines you can say, it instead shows you icons that represent the topic you want to talk about. For example, if you want to talk about the clown, you click on the clown icon. The system has already been used in games such as Discworld and Sam & Max Fury Road, but I feel like Revolution perfected it. The icons are easy to understand, and they serve to keep your part of the dialogue a mystery. It also feels more natural, considering the fact that you can click on your inventory items during a conversation to ask about them or show them to the person you're talking to. In theory, this is a really cool mechanic. In theory. While it might seem interesting when you have like 3 items, it becomes way too tiring when you have 8 or 9 items. Asking every character about these items starts feeling systematic rather than fun. You might argue that you don't need to show all these items to every character since only some of them yield results. But that's the problem. You don't know which items to show to which character. Sure, sometimes they make sense, like showing the matchbox to the rug seller since the matchbox has the same design as his most obvious rug. Or like in many situations where you show the assassin's picture, since that's a pretty obvious thing to do, showing the picture of the man you're after to people you meet. But other times, there's no logic behind it whatsoever. You're just supposed to know that you need to show Merlin's ID card to this hospital clerk. You're just supposed to know that you need to show the clown nose to this gendarme. This happens multiple times, but even if it happened only once, that's still one time too many. Imagine you're playing this game for the first time and you see that giving an item to a character with no logic behind it progresses the story. You're gonna think it will happen again. So now you need to ask everyone about everything you have just in case. Sometimes even the outcome doesn't make any sense. Take the gendarme example. See, you want to enter the sewers here, but you can't because a juggler...
No! I am a jongleur!
Sorry, I mean a jongleur, is entertaining some tourists right next to the manhole. Not to mention, there's a gendarme sitting outside a nearby cafe. You can't enter the sewers with everyone around you. How do you solve this issue? Well, you talk to the jongleur and ask him if you could give the juggling thing a try. You fail miserably and are booed by the crowd. You then need to show the nose to the gendarme, and he's like, "Oh, if I knew you were a clown, this would have been funny instead of humiliating." So now you go back to the jongleur and try again, but this time with the clown nose. You fail, but this time the crowd loves it. The jongleur leaves in anger, and the gendarme decides it's time to go back to work. Now you can open the manhole cover and enter the sewers. How does any of this make sense? How can wearing just the clown's nose be enough to make this funny? How is taking the nose off directly after the joke make the crowd laugh? Why would this make the jongleur angry? Why did the gendarme leave? And how is opening the manhole cover in front of the tourists okay? I guess this is a good segue to talk about the game's puzzles. Some of them are alright, some of them are not. Most of the puzzles in this game are inventory-based puzzles, and whilst many of them make sense, quite a few of them encourage the try everything on everything till something happens mentality. A trend that sadly carried over to the later games in the series and became a common thing in adventure games in general. Whenever someone talks about awful puzzles, the goat puzzle in Broken Sword 1 is usually one of the first puzzles people think of. I mean, the puzzle has its own Wikipedia page. That's how infamous it was. To those of you who don't know it, here's the idea. You need to go down this ladder, however, every time you approach it, the goat headbutts George. The same thing happens if you try to approach this broken plow. What you're meant to do is go to the hole first, then as soon as you get hit by the goat, you immediately click on the plow. Then George runs towards it, moves it, and when the goat lunges at you, it gets stuck. As awful as I think that puzzle is, I feel like picking on it in a game full of equally bad puzzles is kinda unfair. This puzzle is bad, but I can think of ways to make it better. The reason people hate this puzzle is because it doesn't use mechanics that were already established in the game. This is the only time you're able to make George run, but if the game had a run function in the first place, this puzzle may not have been that hard to figure out. There could have also been a few hints here and there. George might say, "This goat won't let me pass. Maybe I can outrun it." However, there are puzzles in this game that I consider to be worse, because even though they use mechanics that were established by the game, they are so poorly communicated that they might as well not have. I wouldn't go so far as to call them moon logic, of course. This isn't a Sierra game after all. But they're still pretty bad, and I feel like the goat puzzle was acting like a scapegoat for them. Pun not intended. For example, there's this one where you need to get into Marquet's room at the hospital. I already mentioned how you need to show Merlin's ID card to the clerk so she'd give you his room number. You go there, but the nurse won't allow you to see him, because it's not visiting hours. Now you need to find another way. What you need is a doctor's coat. You can find one in this closet, but the janitor won't allow you to open it, so you need to unplug his machine, which will distract him long enough for you to open the closet and take the doctor's coat. Now, the nurse will allow you to do whatever you want in her ward. So far, so good, right? I mean, let's ignore the fact that she saw you without the coat just a few minutes ago and still didn't recognize you with the coat, but so far, this is an okay puzzle. Now, let's go and see Marquet.
Doctor!
What is it?
You haven't taken my blood pressure.
Yep, this patient won't allow you to go see him. Let that sink in. A patient isn't allowing the doctor to see other patients. He keeps pestering you to take his blood pressure. You do so, but he isn't convinced that you did it right. How do you get past this patient? While wearing the doctor's coat, you need to go speak to Hagenmeyer, the owner of this hospital. He tells you to take his nephew Bunny along with you to teach him how things work in this hospital.
My name's Benoit, but everyone calls me Bunny.
Bunny?
That's right. I used to have this cute habit when I was a kid.
Keep it to yourself, Benoit.
You both go to the ward Marquet is kept in, you give Bunny the pressure gauge and tell him to use it on the entitled patient. Now you're free to go see Marquet. This puzzle was not hard at all, but it was so unnecessary and time-consuming. The part where you get the doctor's coat was fine. Why have the rest? This puzzle did not give me any sense of accomplishment and only felt like a waste of time. There are more puzzles like it, and I feel like these types of puzzles are just padding. Something we never saw in Beneath a Steel Sky. Here's another awful puzzle in the same area as the goat one. Inside the dig, you'll see a statue on the floor that has 5 pegs on its back that are meant to go into these sockets on the wall. Since the statue is too heavy, you can't put it back. However, you push it over and it leaves an impression in the dirt. If you search a nearby table, you'll find some plaster of Paris. You take some plaster and pour it into the impression. You need to smooth it in, and now it's time to add some water. Where do you get the water? Well, there's a pub nearby, so you can just go there and buy a glass of water. Just kidding, you need to break this switch outside the pub, which makes the beer pump stop working. You then need to ask the bartender for beer. He tries the pump and realizes it's not working, and then out of nowhere the dishwasher also stops working. You show him Merlin's ID card, and since Merlin is an electrician, the pub owner thinks that you're Merlin and asks you to fix the dishwasher before fixing his pump. You fix it by stealing this guy's wire when he sneezes, then using it on the plug of the dishwasher. The pub owner is happy and lets you into his cellar to fix his pump. You go in, open the latch, go back out, open this grid to light up the cellar, then go back in and use the sink to get some water. How do you get the water to the dig? If you answered, get a cup or a bottle, you'd be wrong. You need to take the towel under this man's elbow when he lifts his arm up, take it down to the cellar, then use it to soak up some water. Now you need to go back to the impression in the dig, but you have to do it fast before the towel dries up, and there's nothing telling you whether it dried up or not, so you'll only know when you reach the dig and use it. Too bad George used all his running power on this goat thing. You squeeze the towel over the plaster, then take it out and put it into the socket in the wall. This puzzle is horrible. Why can't I just ask the pub owner for some water? Why do I need to vandalize his pub in order to get into his cellar? I do need to point out that you find this gem in the cellar, which is necessary for the plot. However, George did not know that that thing is in the cellar, so as far as he knows, he did all of that just to get to this poor man's sink. This entire puzzle was nonsensical, time-consuming, and full of pixel hunting. Pixel hunting is never fun, and in a game that has such beautiful visuals, it can be difficult to find specific hotspots that look very similar to the rest of the background. Oh, and then there's this puzzle in Marib. The Trail of the Templars takes you to a small town in Syria called Marib. You meet a taxi driver, our friend Ultar, who tells you where the guy behind the clown bombing went. You ask him to take you there, but he requires $50. And since George apparently is completely broke and can't afford it, I mean, the guy only wore one outfit throughout the entire game, you don't have $50. So we need to get that money somehow. How do you get it? Well, this kid, Nijo, wants your ball. You agree to give it to him if he helps you with a specific task. The kebab seller stole a toilet brush from a nearby club, and you want to bring it back to the club's owner. You ask Nijo for help, and he ends up getting you the brush. Now you go back to the club and give it back to the owner. When you go back down, you find Nijo bouncing the ball off of a wall next to his father's stand. You pet the cat, and it jumps onto one of the stand's shelves. You then ring the bell on the table, and Nijo's dad opens the door, the ball bounces off the door and scares the cat, who then knocks off a cheap plaster statue and breaks it. You take the statue and rub it with a dirty tissue, and that, for some reason, makes it look like stone instead of plaster. You show the statue to Dwayne, the American tourist, and he offers you $50 for it. In an interview with Mark Butler of WoW 24/7, Cecil said, "With our first game, the objective was to write a serious story but have humor. We went down that route, and LucasArts went down the other, which was slapstick. It's great to grab a monkey, squash him, and get a monkey wrench to use. But we like logic, and making puzzles that are relevant to the protagonist at that particular point in the story. It's very easy to take one of the most ridiculous puzzles in a LucasArts game to try and make a point, but allow me to offer another perspective. In Day of the Tentacle, there's a puzzle where you need to get a blanket from John Hancock, but he won't give it to you because he's freezing to death. You ask why they don't just start a fire, and he says that Thomas Jefferson is hogging the log of wood for posterity. In order to make Jefferson start a fire, you need to make George Washington cold. But since he's George I spent the winter in Valley Forge, Washington, that won't be possible. You can, however, make him look cold. You need to give him these novelty chattering teeth, but he won't take them right now because he still has his wooden teeth. So you give him a prank cigar, light it, and when it explodes, his teeth are blown away. Now you can give him the teeth. As soon as Hancock sees Washington's teeth chattering, he convinces Jefferson that Washington is cold and that they should build a fire. Now that Hancock is warm and cozy, you can finally get the blanket. This puzzle is bonkers and it's hilarious. You know what though? It makes sense. It might be a slapsticky puzzle, but it is relatively logical, albeit in a cartoony way. However, using a dirty tissue on a cheap statue to make it look ancient is not logical in any way, cartoony or not. Just because something is slapstick, that doesn't make it illogical. Day of the Tentacle is a hilarious, cartoony game, yet none of its puzzles made me say, "Oh come on, this makes no sense whatsoever," like the ones in Broken Sword did. How can George go to a small town in Syria and not be ready with some Syrian pounds in his pocket? And why is Zoltar asking for dollars anyway? I don't think they use dollars in rural areas in Syria, do they? Now you might say, but Nijo, you criticize Broken Sword for the towel puzzle in Ireland because George could have easily bought a glass of water from the barman. By your logic, why didn't Hoagie just get any log to start the fire? Wouldn't that make more sense? To answer that, let's look at both puzzles in two different ways. Does changing the puzzle make sense? Does changing the puzzle compromise the theming? Let's look at the log puzzle in Day of the Tentacle. Does it make sense to let Hoagie get any other log? Yes, it does. I mean, there's even a scene where Washington chops down a tree, so you could have just used its wood for building a fire. And it would, in fact, make more sense. Now let's look at the theming. Would changing this puzzle compromise the theming? Absolutely. The jokes here are Hancock feeling like he's not respected at all, Jefferson's weird attachment to this log, and how much of a Washington fanboy Jefferson is. Changing this puzzle would completely ruin all these three jokes. How about this one? Does it make sense to let George just buy a glass of water? Yes, it would. This whole towel thing makes no sense whatsoever, especially the barely damp part. You put a wet towel in your pocket, you maniac. Your clothes probably soaked up all the water. Would changing this puzzle compromise the theming? Absolutely not. If anything, it would enhance it. The puzzle is already there. You had to get through this guy, get over the wall, get past the goat, and figure out how to make a replica of the statue's back. In a game where you need to go back in time and stop an evil tentacle from enslaving all of humanity, I would gladly accept a puzzle where you need to blow up Washington's teeth and give him chattering teeth so that he'd look cold enough for Jefferson to start a fire. In a game about Templars, assassins, and secret orders, I find it hard to believe that George couldn't afford $50 for a taxi ride or couldn't afford a glass of water from the bartender. These puzzles do not enhance the game's theme, they hurt it. I'm already suspending my disbelief about how George is able to take such a huge tool with him through airport security, so I don't think I'm being unreasonable with my complaints here. And the saddest part is that I know Revolution can do better. They have done better in Beneath a Steel Sky. I don't recall ever getting annoyed with a puzzle in that game. I almost always understood what I needed to do. Heck, even Brokek's Sword has a few well-made puzzles. This chess one, whilst it wasn't very well communicated to the player, had a cool idea. You need to arrange the white pieces so that white can checkmate red. There's also this one where you need to distract a guard at the museum in order to sneak into the sarcophagus. And of course, there's my favorite one. You need a key from this guard in order to enter the door behind him. You can't just take it, however you can borrow it since it's chained together with the bathroom key. In the bathroom, you find a bar of soap. You make an imprint of the key into the bar and use plaster to create a fake-looking replica. You go upstairs and find a way to distract the painter in order to dip your key into his paint pot. You do so by calling Nico and telling her to distract him for you. After you do so, you borrow the key from the guard once more, and whilst in the bathroom, you swap the real one for the fake one. Now it looks convincing, but it doesn't feel real. During your conversation with the guard, he mentions that he keeps a pair of gloves with him just in case it gets cold. So you turn off the heater and it'll get cold enough for him to put his gloves on. This means he won't feel the difference. All you have to do now is get him out of the way. You call Nico again and ask her to call back and ask for the painter. She calls back and the guard answers. He goes up to get the painter and gets into an argument with him. I genuinely loved this puzzle. This is what I was expecting all puzzles to be like in Broken Sword. This proves that they do know how to make interesting gear-turning puzzles. So what's all this about? Although this is meant as a joke, there are 3 deaths in this game that are on par with deaths in Sierra games. Hey look, a step up from Beneath a Steel Sky's 2 awful deaths. All in all, there are 8 instances in this game where death is possible. Most of them are fine, and some are quite comical.
Okay, nobody move. I'm making a citizen's arrest. You're all going away for a very long time. And you can just drop those guns. You're impressing nobody.
But there are 3 that genuinely bugged me. The first one is on this train. Whilst you're walking on top of the train, you can touch its mechanism and die. Whilst one might argue that that's justifiable, I mean, why would anyone touch that in the first place? The problem here is that behind said mechanism, there seems to be an exit. You click on it and you die. Putting that exit there is such a mean and unfair trap. There is no warning whatsoever, and I hate that sort of thing. The second one, which I think is way worse, is the one at the Hotel Ubu. You go through a lot of work in order to get your hands on the manuscript. You're excited to take it back to Nico's to inspect it. You go out the door, and this happens.
Is this what you're after, Guido?
See, that's it.
I can explain everything. Well, almost everything.
Too late. You're on your way to feed the fishes.
I'm allergic to fish. I break out in blotches when I eat tuna.
Let's go.
There's absolutely no warning. If you didn't save beforehand, this will feel like a huge slap in the face. The only way to know that this might happen is if you go out the door before getting the manuscript. They search you and find nothing, but now you know they're looking for something. However, it's completely possible to get the manuscript without ever needing to go out, so you're likely to miss this poor excuse of a warning. What you're supposed to do is take the manuscript to one of the hotel's rooms, go out the window, and throw it into the alleyway. After they search you and find nothing, you go into the alleyway and retrieve the manuscript. What frustrates me is that there is an easy fix for this puzzle. Although it was altered in the remake, I feel like that was more of a cop-out than an actual solution. What happens in the remake is that George would refuse to go out whilst holding the manuscript, saying he's worried about the thugs standing outside. A better solution for this issue would have been to make George accidentally drop the ID card whilst climbing out the window. You need that card to get the manuscript anyway, so you have to go to the back alley to get it. You go out, the thugs search you, they find nothing, but now you know they're after something. This way, the game ensures that you went out at least once before getting the manuscript. And since you already dropped the card in the alleyway once, now you know that you can drop something else. This would have been a good enough warning and a good enough hint as to what you're meant to do. The third death is not necessarily as bad, but it is quite unfair. Whilst in Syria, you're held at gunpoint by the assassin behind the cafe bombing. He asks you questions about what you saw inside the cave, and you're given the chance whether to lie or tell the truth. Assuming everything goes right, he tells you that he has no choice but to kill you, so he asks you whether you want to die like a man or like a dog. Choosing the dog option gets you killed.
Hey, look now. Don't kill me. I've got money. Maybe we can cut a deal.
You disappoint me.
Choosing the man option impresses him.
Okay, you're the boss. I'll take my medicine.
You are an honorable man, Mr. Stobart. A rare breed. I should like to shake your hand.
Yeah. Well, what the heck?
This is where you choose the palm shocker. George shocks and punches him, then jumps off the cliff into Ultar's taxi, driving away to safety. I thought this section was great, but what mars it for me is the questions part. See, in such a situation, you'd think lying would be a better option, but you'd be wrong. In fact, if you keep lying to every question he asks, this is what happens.
Now, if you're gonna kill me, just get it over with, because I've got a full itinerary.
Very well.
It comes out of nowhere and just feels unfair. What's funny about it is that if you keep telling the truth, everything goes well. Look, I know I seem a bit too critical, but I genuinely care about this game, and I know it can be better than it is right now. This might seem a bit too egotistical, but part of me hopes that this review might help Revolution make the perfect Broken Sword game. Or at least I hope it would help aspiring developers avoid these flaws when making their own adventure games. Many new adventure game devs hold this game close to heart, including myself, and perhaps my review could put things into perspective. Broken Sword, The Shadow of the Templars, is still a brilliant game, despite its flaws, and I would highly suggest it to any fan of the adventure genre, if for nothing other than the phenomenal story itself. I may have seemed a bit too critical in this review, however, I still adore it. It may not be number 1, but it's still on my top 10 adventure games of all time list, and I wholeheartedly suggest it to anyone who loves adventure stories. The visuals are gorgeous, the music is fantastic, the writing, although a bit too much, is still excellent. To me, its selling point is its brilliant plot. If you have not played this game yet, you owe it to yourself to buy it. The director's cut is available on both Steam and GOG, however, do not play that version. Instead, either download the original from the extras section if you bought the GOG version, or download the original in the form of a free DLC if you bought the Steam version. I haven't tried the Steam version, but the GOG version is already optimized to be played on ScumVM and it works like a charm. Before we wrap things up, I want to talk about the director's cut. In 2009, Ubisoft published a remake of Broken Sword on the Wii and Nintendo DS under the name Broken Sword: The Shadow of the Templars Director's Cut. Later in 2010, the game was released on iOS and PC, then later on Android devices. Instead of just porting the game, Cecil wanted to make some changes, and while some of these changes were fine, most of them were unnecessary at best and awful at worst. That's not to say there weren't any improvements. For example, pressing an exit immediately takes you to the next room, which saves quite some time. All deaths in the game have been removed, which is something I'll never complain about. The goat puzzle has been significantly simplified. Phone conversations now don't take you to a new screen, making them a bit faster. The game now highlights all hotspots, which is always welcome in my opinion, and there's a hint system just in case you ever get stuck. But that was it. Other than these few changes, the director's cut is a step down from the original in almost every way. Some of these changes make me wonder what Revolution were thinking when making this remake. Take the cutscenes, for example. When comparing the new cutscenes with the original ones, it feels like they just didn't care about quality. If that wasn't bad enough, they even spliced some modern animations into the old cutscenes, completely ruining them in the process. I know that Mike Burgess, the animator of the original cutscenes, has sadly passed away before the production of this remake. However, if you couldn't find an animator to replicate the original cutscenes well enough, why make new cutscenes in the first place? And it's not just the visuals. They added unnecessary lines of dialogue that just didn't need to be there.
I was pretty sure the waitress was taking a shine to me. That old Stobart charm, I guess. Little did I know my reverie was about to be so rudely interrupted.
Why would George talk over what's happening? The intro cutscene in the original was perfect, and it told us everything we need to know without using a single word. Another example of this is in the assassin's room at the hotel. This is what happens in the original when the assassin opens the closet while George is hiding inside it. And this is what happens in the director's cut.
As Khan opened the wardrobe, I was sure I was dead. But he grabbed his pants quickly and didn't even see me. I didn't usually spy on men getting changed. But this guy was a killer, and I didn't want any surprises. He left his checkered pants on the bed.
Apparently, someone at Revolution felt that without George's input, we couldn't possibly understand what was going on. And for some reason, they decided to add portraits to the characters while they're talking. These portraits were drawn by Dave Gibbons, the well-known comics artist who worked with Alan Moore on Watchmen and with Revolution on Beneath a Steel Sky. I wouldn't have minded these portraits if it weren't for how awful they looked. Most of them look nothing like the actual character. We already know what George looks like, and that's not it. We already know what Maguire looks like, and that's not it. And look at Marquet in-game. Would you think this is what he looks like? The clerk at the hospital has straight hair in-game, but not in her portrait. Flap in-game looks like he's a fat goon wearing a cab driver's hat. Yet in his portrait, he looks like an army veteran wearing a beret. This isn't Beneath a Steel Sky, where characters' faces were blurred beyond recognition. Yes, their faces may not be LucasArts level of clear, but they're clear enough for there to be a noticeable difference between their faces and their portraits. Not only do these portraits ruin the game's overall atmosphere, but they also look very bland and sloppy. Dave Gibbons drew these. The Dave Gibbons. Gibbons also made a short comic book for this game, just like he did for Beneath a Steel Sky. So let's take a look at it. This looks like something I'd expect from a mediocre webcomic. But in a Revolution Software game, by none other than Dave Gibbons? Just compare it to his Beneath a Steel Sky comic book. How are these two made by the same person? Although most of the animations were left intact, some of them have been downgraded for reasons I'll never understand. Look at how George opens the manuscript at Nico's apartment in the original. Then look at how he does it in the director's cut. Look at the goat's animation after it gets stuck in the original.
The rope by which the goat was tethered had become tangled on the old plowshare.
Then look at its animation in the director's cut.
The rope by which the goat was tethered had become tangled on the old plowshare.
Look at how George jumps from one cart to the other in the original, then look at how he does it in the director's cut. It just blows my mind that after 13 years, the animations became worse rather than better. What bothers me is that the new animations in the new parts aren't that bad. So how did they manage to mess up animations that were already there? Even the icon animations are a downgrade. Just take a look at the pickup icon animation. In the original, its animation looks like a full loop of someone picking up something with their index finger and thumb. But in the director's cut, it looks like they took half that loop, then reversed it, making it look very awkward. Also, what happened to all the colorful speech texts? Why are they all the same color now and look so dull and uninteresting? I don't know how to explain it, but when I play this version, I feel like I'm playing an iOS or Android game. I don't feel like I'm playing one of the best PC adventure games ever made. As I've mentioned, the game was released first on the Wii and Nintendo DS, then on PC a year later. I don't understand why the game wasn't given a widescreen option when it was ported to the PC. You can't even change the game's resolution. The screen resolution option just changes the screen size. Also, I'd understand if its visuals weren't enhanced over the original, but to be made worse? Look at this man sitting in the hotel's lobby. In the original, you can clearly see the outlines of his suit. In the director's cut, there are no outlines whatsoever, making it look like someone painted over his sprite using Microsoft Paint. That's not even counting the ugly contrast between the old and new art styles. The added parts where you play as Nico seem closer to the art style of Broken Sword 5, where the characters were 3D models that were pre-rendered into 2D sprites, whilst in the original, they were hand-drawn 2D sprites. This contrast is especially noticeable when both Nico and George are standing outside the cafe. The visual downgrades didn't just affect animations and sprite quality, but also affected one of my favorite puzzles. Remember the chessboard puzzle? Remember how atmospheric it was? The music, the chess pieces, it was all so beautiful. Wanna see what it looks like in the director's cut? This might sound like an exaggeration, but this puzzle is what made me hate the director's cut so much. Not because the puzzle itself was ruined, but because this change in visuals makes it look like the developers don't understand what made the original so beautiful. I spent a huge chunk of this video criticizing the gameplay. However, I still adore Broken Sword. To me, it isn't about the puzzles. It's about the story. It's about the atmosphere. I don't mind playing an adventure game with poor puzzles as long as it has an excellent story and great atmosphere. And that's what the original had. Then the director's cut had to go and ruin it all. Look at the world map in the original and look at what it looks like in the remake. Well, at least the original story is still there, right? Yes and no. See, for the most part, the story is still the same. However, there were a few changes. For example, a lot of lines have been omitted and some of them have been replaced with something that is nowhere near as well written. Just listen to George's opening line in the original.
As I picked myself up, all I could hear was the ceaseless drone of traffic. Life went on around me. But the explosion was to change my life forever.
Now listen to his line in the remake.
As I picked myself up, I was really angry. 1 minute I'm on vacation, the next minute some clown's blown me up. I knew right away what I was going to do. I was going to find that clown and bring him to justice. Because justice matters. Justice is up there with liberty and equality and, fraternity. After all, that's why I'd studied law, wasn't it? Well, that, money, of course.
They also cut out lines that make the situations nonsensical, such as this one where Sergeant Moo was trying to speak to the victim.
Stop that, monsieur! Stop holding your breath at once!
Has it occurred to you that he may be dead, Moo?
Stop that, monsieur!
Has it occurred to you that he may be dead, Moo?
Or this one where Flap is goofing around during the museum robbery.
Hey, Guido! Look at this!
Quit fooling around, you moron! Quit fooling around, you moron!
They even removed my favorite joke in the game, and quite frankly, I find that unforgivable.
Go to the house and get my chess set! Yes, the old chess set! Oh, damn the game! Now hurry! Go to the house and get my chess set! Yes, the old chess set! Now hurry!
That's not even mentioning the added subplot regarding Nico's father. See, unlike the original, this game starts off with Nico instead of George. She was invited by Pierre Carchon, a millionaire who wanted her to interview him. Whilst she was there, he was killed by the assassin disguised as a mine. Whilst investigating his death, she discovers that he has connections with the assassin's other victims. Later on, she finds out that he was close friends with her father, and that her father and Pierre's wife were in love. After finding that out, she promises herself to never let the secret of her father become public. I'm paraphrasing, of course, and there's a bit more to it, but here's why I dislike this subplot. My first issue is the idea that Pierre died on the day before the bombing, yet Nico says nothing about it to George when discussing the clown's previous victims. Bear in mind, at this point, she knew her father was somehow involved, but she had no reason to hide Pierre's death. It's especially weird since his death was mentioned in the newspaper that George found outside the cafe. And the fact that it ends up with her deciding to keep it a secret just makes the whole subplot unnecessary. My second issue with this subplot is that before it was forced into the game, Nico was a fiery photojournalist that wanted to get her hands on the scoop of a lifetime. She was interested in these murders because no one else was talking about them. She was convinced that there was a conspiracy behind it, and like any good journalist, she wanted to uncover it. That makes her character feel a lot more realistic and relatable. We all have ambitions, so we know what it feels like to want them so badly.
I don't blame you for being scared. I am too. But this story could be my only chance of a big break.
Or a premature death.
But with this subplot added, now her motives for uncovering the conspiracy are too dramatic and extremely personal. I mean, God forbid she would be in it for the glory, right? That wouldn't make her character relatable or likable at all. Nah, let's just involve her dad so that it's super relatable. According to Cecil, Nico's subplot has been there from the start and wasn't just an afterthought for the director's cut. But from where I'm standing, it certainly looks like an afterthought. It started well enough, but it ended up going nowhere and it made Nico a bit less relatable. The director's cut had some new puzzles and some extensions on the old ones, and I can honestly say that I'm not a fan of any of them. They're annoying at best, and they make no sense whatsoever within the world of this game. In what world would finding a sliding puzzle on a gate is considered normal? This isn't a gate that's hidden within a dungeon or something. It's just there. Any passerby could have easily solved this and get in. This puzzle has no business being here, and it's not even a fun one. Original puzzles that had modern extensions added to them were just awful. Remember the one where you had to put the lens into the scroll the knight was holding? Well, now it has a match the picture puzzle attached to it. How does this make any sense? Are you rotating different layers of the lens itself? The chess puzzle also now has this kindergarten level color matching puzzle that honestly felt insulting to solve. And then there's the lion head puzzle. God, this puzzle was horrible. You need to turn this dial in order to enter a specific series of numbers. The process is so slow because for some reason they added a waiting time between each button press, making rotating these dials an absolute chore. The number sequence does not make it any easier either. Also, I needed a mirror in order to reflect some light on the wall to see where the keyhole is. So how is this puzzle so well lit? I could go on and on about everything wrong with this remake if I wanted to. And I do want to, so here goes. Some parts of the game have this annoying close-up mechanic that wasn't necessary at all and only made things slower. You can't beckon George to the other side of the room anymore. If the cursor is outside the play area, it doesn't respond. The inventory system went from this simple style, where all your inventory is on top of the screen, to this annoying click on this bag to open your inventory style. You can't talk to characters if they are standing in front of an exit. You can't cancel actions once initiated. You can't use the phone in Nico's apartment anymore. The conversation system is now in the middle of the screen, making it easy to accidentally click on an option you did not want to click on. The original offered 232 save slots while the remake offered only 10. These are all nitpicks and none of them are game-breaking. However, they still need to be brought up because none of them were present in the original. I find it hard to forgive a remake when I know the original did it much better. So whatever you do, do not play this version. Purchase it for the original, but do not waste your time on this sad excuse of a remake unless you have no other choice. It still gives you the wonderful story of the original, but everything else about it is just a disappointment. That's all for this video. Thank you so much for watching. Join me next time as we take a look at the second game in the series, Broken Sword 2: The Smoking Mirror. I hope you enjoyed this video. Have a good day.